Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the Soboco quarterly webinar. This one today is entitled The Volunteer Highlights, Volunteerism in New Jersey. And I have some highlights that I'd like to share before we get started, and then I'm going to introduce our panel. One thing that I want everyone to remember is a quote I saw on the internet a few weeks ago, and it said, "Volunteerism is one of the most important and beneficial actions that we can take as human beings. Our ability to provide our time and expertise can make an immense difference in the world around us and within the communities where we reside. And as well, of course, there's a positive impact on your own health and well-being in addition to the community involvement that you deliver." When we thought about that and the importance of volunteerism, we talked about attracting, managing, retaining volunteers for your nonprofit. We thought it was such an essential topic. Who could address this important issue? Where would we find those wonderful panelists who deal with volunteers every day and who would come and share with you the challenges, the obstacles, and the wonderful opportunities that they create within their organizations? So I'm going to take a minute to introduce our two guests today. And I'm doing that because sometimes someone has such great credentials and you gloss over them in the hurry to get to the topic. But I want you to know the quality of the people sitting in this room and the advice that they're going to be sharing. Jackie Luby is the Director of Volunteers and Programs at the Cornerstone Family Programs and Morristown Neighbor House. She's the Director of Volunteers and Programs and is responsible for volunteer recruitment, orientation, and project coordination for more than 400 community and corporate volunteers, including the Drew University student volunteers who clock in with over 1,600 volunteer hours each year. In her role, she works with corporate and other organizations to design days of service and large volunteer events to include Novartis Pharmaceuticals, Wells Fargo, BASF, Wyndham Worldwide, Aramark, and more. You can get the sense of the kind of role she has, the responsibility she has, and the way that she has oversight of the volunteers who come through and make their programs possible at Cornerstone Family Programs and Morristown Neighborhood House. Erin Pack is the front of house director of the Mayo Performing Arts Center in Morristown. It's a nonprofit arts organization. As front of house director, by the way, has anyone ever heard that term before? Except for you, Meg? Yes, front of house. It was a new term for me. I was very excited. You learn something new every day, and I learned that when I met Erin. She oversees all house managers and the volunteer program. She has been with MPAC for over 12 years, starting as an assistant house manager in 2007 and moving steadily to the position that she currently holds. During her tenure, she has expanded the volunteer program, creating an internal handbook, outlining rules and regulations, and we'll talk about the value of a handbook for you as well with your organization. She's developed an extensive training policy and designed and implemented an incentive program to attract and encourage a stronger base of volunteers. So you know the credibility and the real-world hands-on work that is being done by my two colleagues here. You might wonder again, how important is all this anyway? So I want to make sure that I just share a couple of brief statistics with you. The first is in New Jersey, 1,865,865 volunteers contribute 162.7, I would call that 163, million hours of service, which is worth about $3.9 billion in New Jersey. Countrywide, that number is actually about $184 billion. So this is not a small segment of our population. This is not an insignificant, oh, I'll do it when I have some time. I'm one of the people who's retired and I'm just puttering around doing some volunteer work. This is a serious business. The average hourly rate for volunteers, if they were paid employees, would be about $24 an hour. Important for you as leaders in the nonprofit community is to know that a volunteer eagerly and enthusiastically engaged in your organization usually donates about twice what a normal donor would give because they are already engaged in taking ownership of what you're doing by being involved themselves. So it's an important way not only to generate the work and activities that volunteers do, but also to take it a step further and have it as a financial commitment. So here is some of the breakdown of the volunteers and what areas they work in. Everything from sports and hobby to public safety, the full gamut of all of the services that nonprofits offer. So if we know it's important, then we need to know how to attract those volunteers, not only to retain them, but also to attract them. So first off, before we even get started in terms of making it easy to volunteer, let's talk about for a minute, how do you get those volunteers in the first place? They just fall out of the sky, you open the door, and they walk through it? Why don't you just tell us a bit about how do you get volunteers in the first place?
I mean, that would be really easy.
Open the door and then they come.
They just come in. Being a part of the Mayo Performing Arts Center, we are a very large building and well-known performing arts center at this point in the heart of Morristown. And I know some of you may know our background. We reopened because of volunteer efforts in 1994. So a lot of people already have a very strong connection to the theater itself, because if you listen to my volunteers and sit down with them, a lot of them were already there, even in the 70s, you know. So honestly, it's become a word of mouth from volunteer to volunteer, or friends and neighbors, as well as our patrons. A lot of people are already patrons of our theater, so they end up going, I love this place, how can I give back? And then they come to me going, so how can I do this? And usually that's in the middle of the busiest part of a show. But people generally do want to help. So that's easy to attract in that realm. Otherwise, to try to get more of a college-based, early 20s to 30s, we've gone to the lengths. I go to career fairs, I go to colleges and stuff like that to try to recruit, as well as playbill.com, trying to get, I like age diversity. Everyone loves the arts, no matter the age range. So those are the avenues we've kind of taken.
Jackie, how about you? Same?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about our programs is that we have so many of them. So we have everything at Cornerstone Family Programs, from toddlers and subsidized childcare programs all the way up through our senior programs, where our eldest senior is currently 105 years old, and she is sassy as ever. And then we have everything in between. We've got veterans programs, recreation programs. So the fact that we have such a wide breadth of programs really lends itself to helping our volunteer program be so successful, because there really is an option for everybody. So I would say most of our volunteers do come from word of mouth, just like Erin kind of mentioned. If people are looking for, a way to get involved, we kind of have a little bit of everything that they might possibly be interested in, other than pets. If we had, some dogs, I think we might get some more people in the door. But, we do also have some very long-standing relationships with community partners. So we do have a connection at a lot of the local universities, which lends itself every year to kind of a set number of volunteers. We have partnerships at a lot of the local high schools with, the service clubs, which kind of helps us recruit there. So there are a lot of different ways, other than word of mouth, if you can set up kind of strategically your relationships throughout the community to kind of help you get, a steady income of volunteers throughout the course of the year that you can rely on.
Thank you so much. So we know that making it easy, you have people who have other things to do, that, quote, real world, and you're working hard to get them interested and engaged. Now that they are, how do you make sure that getting connected to you is an easy process? Darren, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the ways that you communicate or have expressed the requirements, and everyone is clear on what's going to be expected?
We've spent quite a bit of time on our volunteer page. A lot of them actually find us through our website. So we were actively trying to make our volunteer page a little more brighter, a little more attractive of what do they do? How can I see what kind of events that, they participate in? So that has helped. My email is right there in big, bold letters, so you can find me pretty easily. But as well, I know Fifi is the front of house director. I am very present at performances. So it's a very big opportunity for me to engage the public as they're coming in through our doors. And if they're interested, to be able to talk to them a little bit about it. Other than that, I do have several inquiry forms and registration that gives you kind of the idea of what we expect from a volunteer base if you are interested in joining us. As well as I take a lot of phone interviews. People like details. So it's kind of going bit by bit of how does our program run and what is expected of an individual that wants to be a part of the program.
Jackie, the same question for you, but also I know you did say you have a lot of programs, which makes it possibly, maybe I'm being naive, easier to place volunteers. If someone comes to you and says, this is what we want to do, and you can match that up. So how do you coordinate with the volunteers individuals, corporates, to engage them and find something useful and valuable for them to do?
Sure. So first of all, we try to make our process as easy as possible. I mean, the biggest thing that we always hear is, you know, I've been calling around, I really want to give back to my community, I'm not hearing back from anybody, or, you know, they're giving me the runaround, or we're a corporate group, we're, you know, 50 people, nobody can accommodate us, we're too large. So one of the things we try to do is from the start, just make it easy for people. I mean, they're here, they want to help you, so, you know, why make their life difficult? They want to give back. So what we try to do is have kind of the same process for everybody. They come in, we kind of go over our programs. If it's an individual, we'll take them on a tour of our facility. What better way to kind of educate them on everything that you do, because these are the people that are going to be your biggest advocates in the long run. So the more you have their ear and can kind of give them a full perspective of everything you do, the better. But, you know, back to making it easy, have your straight guidelines. So for us, we do a lot of child care programs. We don't take volunteers who are under age 14. But that's not to say if somebody calls and they say, you're too young, we're not going to take you. We always try to have another option for them. So, you know, you might be too young to volunteer in our programs right now, but you could certainly do another project for us where you might run a collection drive. You might do something with your friends and family where you collect things for our child care programs or for our veterans programs. You could put goodie bags together. So you're still giving back to our organization, but on your own time. And when you're old enough, certainly come back to us. Same thing for volunteer groups. You know, if you're a group of 50 that we can't accommodate, you know, I'll go to you. We'll come out to your facility. We will do something creative on site. I'll bring, you know, maybe a client or a program manager who can speak to that program, give you the impact so this group knows where their, you know, time is going to. But maybe, you know, we do it with you. You put together kits on site and things like that. So we try to really think outside of the box. We really don't want to tell people, I'm sorry, we can't help you. So we really try to have some creative options to go with as well.
Excellent. Do you have, is it similar in terms of special projects, or are you a little bit more locked in? Because this is pretty flexible to be able to say, what are your needs and how can we align with the organization's needs?
Yeah, that's a little more flexible than, I mean, our program is as flexible as possible. When she says like under 18, since our program, they work amongst a alcohol setting, we do have concessions available inside the theater, so we don't allow to have 18 and younger to be by themselves. But that's where I try to encourage families to come in as a whole. Like families are always looking for, well, what can we do together? How can we give back together? And if they're interested in the arts, I've had several families come in. When I first got there, there was a family of 4, and their kids were, I think, 10 and 12. Well, I bumped into them, and she's 24 now, but it's amazing. Like, that's what they did as a family. They'd come twice a week and usher together. So that is one of my favorite ways to get the families involved. But I recently even opened up the program to those on the spectrum and bringing them into the arts. So I don't know, it is flexible.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little more flexible. I mean, we have one program, and our program is to help give excellent customer service at our performances. So it's a little bit different spectrums between Jackie and I.
I think what's the common theme, which is really important, is thinking outside the box. What else can we do? How can we leverage this pool of people that so much want to be engaged and be our advocates, as you said, and at the same time address the needs of the organization? So obviously, if you've got these great volunteers who just marched through the door unexpected, without any work on your part at all, and now they're there, and you've made it easy to be connected to you, how do you get them oriented and started off? So how do you set that positive tone? What is it that you do that helps you get that orientation going and have everyone engaged on the same page and get a good experience from it?
Sure. So I am a huge proponent of volunteer orientation. I think it is so important. It really sets the tone for their entire relationship with you. I think one of the worst things that could happen is you have a volunteer come in and they feel like they don't know what's expected of them, because then they feel like they're not needed and their time isn't valuable to you. So this is an opportunity, one, to discuss your mission. Like I said before, these are the people who are going to be going out. They're going to talk to their friends, and they're going to say, what did you do yesterday? Oh, I was volunteering at, Mayo or at the neighborhood house. And they'll say, well, what do they do? So this is a great area where you can educate them. I would say take some time, go through all of your programs, let your volunteers know exactly what you do. Even if they're volunteering in a different program, they they should understand the whole breadth of everything that you do at your agency. This is your opportunity to really clearly define expectations, rules, regulations, what exactly you need them to do on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's also, really important to introduce your volunteers to key staff, because as a volunteer manager, in most instances, you're probably wearing a few other hats. You might not always be the one that's on site, so if they know who their direct supervisor is when you're not there, they kind of have some other staff. If they really build a bond with your staff, that's even more important, because then they really love what they're doing. They really feel like a part of the team. And then also, always have them sign off on this. So go through all your rules. If you ever come to a point where, you do have one of those problem volunteers, hopefully it doesn't happen, but every so often it might, that's something that's a little bit awkward. How do you kind of manage or get to the point where you might need to fire somebody that's not even working for you? So if you have a handbook and you can refer back to that and say, look, we covered this in the handbook, you signed off on it, we've been having these problems, that really kind of helps you to cover your bases. Hopefully you never have to cross that bridge, but I think a handbook and saying, we clearly defined, these rules, what we needed from you, really kind of helps you across the board and is really, really important.
I completely agree. The orientation process is such an important process. When we do it twice a year at this point, and I sit everybody down, and we can have anywhere from 25 to 50, and we do take the time. It is a very hearty 3 hours generally with doing an orientation, where we explain bit by bit what we are expecting from them, but to kind of understand them and the bonding that you're going to have. I do have my whole staff either sitting and listening in on the orientation and or doing different sections of it. So these are the faces you're going to see when you come to volunteer. And I go person to person to person, have them introduce themselves and ask them, well, what brought you here? Why us? And then you get to sit and listen. Like, some people are like, oh, do you guys, give free tickets? Or you'll get the one that's going, well, I went on a date here with my recently deceased wife 30 some odd years ago. The importance of that building, that we happen to have that connection to the town that we're in. So when you can start already getting to know each individual, and I have a good memory, so I try and play the name game with everybody and have them cover their names. And when they walk in, and I already know who they are.
Good memory.
Good memory. The words are hard, though. Words get hard. Brain moves a little faster. That they know you are already paying attention to them. Them walking through that door, like, wow, you knew I was coming today. You made sure that you introduced me to everybody. And in that meeting, I give several opportunities to be like, if this is too much, if you can't dedicate your time, I ask 18 performances per year to keep everyone super involved. And some people are like, I can't do that. That's just too much. I have a family of 4 or anything that could be coming up. I'm like, I understand. So I give tiny breaks for them to run. And most of them, they just sit there. And at the end of them, like, you can ask me anything. I'm available. Here's the link. I'll email you guys immediately. Register. You sign off. Once you've done that, I know you have made that decision to dedicate yourself to the next season with us.
I hope that everyone's listening carefully enough to hear how professional this approach is, right? We tend to sometimes incorrectly and foolishly think that the nonprofit world is a separate entity. It's not a business. We've already seen the numbers, and the dollars are in billions, and the volunteer hours are in billions. And at the same time, that entity needs to be treated as a profession, as a small business. It is not a nonprofit. What do I always say? It's your tax status, not your business plan. And so everything that's being discussed here, a handbook, you think of a handbook perhaps as being something that a corporation has, but a nonprofit needs that same thing in terms of their volunteerism, so that they can have that very formal, very structured approach, thinking outside the box and being flexible, but at the same time being able to use those hours to the most effectiveness, and those volunteers as if they were paid employees, giving them every benefit of the doubt and every bit of importance of knowing the impact they're having on your organization is critical.
I don't know about you, but my handbook's 30 pages long.
You want to talk about that handbook a minute? Does anyone here have, those of you who are online, we're asking a quick question in the room here. How many have a volunteer handbook in your organization? So everyone on the phone, just to know, a handful have gone up, and raise your hand quietly to yourself for now, but if you don't have one, certainly anyone tell us a little bit about that handbook for a minute? What's in it?
I actually, if anybody would like to look at it at the end, sorry everyone that's online, when I started we had a very simple handbook of about 9 pages, but as we grew as an organization, we always strive to be number one in customer service. They are volunteers, but you still have a professional attitude that you need to put forward when you're in that position. So the handbook goes over, how do you arrive? How do your sign-ups work? How do I get more involved? Are there other things I can do? What do I wear? When do I show up? If I have a problem with a patron, how do I approach that? When is it a good time to get the manager? It's like very detailed little things that most people coming in going, I can't wait to come, I can't wait to help you, this is going to be great. And then they get in a situation, they're like, I have no idea what to do. So that's how we did the guidelines in this handbook, was any situation that I as a manager went through or have seen them go through, slowly started to create this handbook into more of a detailed form that they could follow.
Yeah, it sounds like something that those of you who didn't raise your hand probably need to be considering, because again, the more professionally you approach the situation, the more likely you are to have a good outcome. So again, corporate words, effective engagement and management. We're talking about these employees who are really volunteers. You can't fire them, although you'd like to sometimes, right? They are on the front line. So Jackie, why don't you talk to us a little bit about that, and then Erin will jump right in.
Sure. So, I think this kind of goes straight from orientation. One of the things that we like to do is really have our volunteers have a meeting with the program supervisor that they're going to be working under. So kind of, different from what Erin does, where it's really just one larger program. We have several smaller programs that they're going to be working directly with the program manager. Our staff are always on site when they're with our volunteers. We don't really have any solely volunteer-run programs. So there's always a staff member there, and we always want our volunteers to know who that staff member is and have a good relationship with them. And the most important thing is that just as we have our volunteer guidelines, that our staff know exactly what those are too. So we want everybody to be on the same page. I don't want our volunteers to say, well, in orientation, Jackie told us this, and you're telling us something different. It's really, really important that your communication is clear. And I think, these volunteers, they're on the front lines in your program, and that's really, really important. They're working with, the children in our program, they're working with the seniors in our program, they're working with the families that we deal with. So I think getting some feedback from them oftentimes is important. They might see some things that you might not. You might be in your office doing a million other things for a million other hats that you wear, and they're the ones that are working with your staff and your clients. So there's stuff that they might bring to your attention that I think is really important to listen to, whether it be, other things you want to implement or concerns or, letting you know, gee, this is some great stuff you're doing here. They always have really great feedback, and I think it's always really, really important to give them the time to give you that feedback.
Erin, how about you? That's an excellent point. With a lot of the volunteers that come in, they have careers, or they had careers, and they know sometimes when you go into go mode of the position of managing all of them, sometimes you see past things. You see the black and the white, and sometimes they come at you with some of the best suggestions that you can implement into your program to make it either run smoother, make it a little easier on the volunteers, make it a little bit better for the patrons. They are your front line. I could be running around doing a million things, but they're dealing with a situation that, maybe we should think about this. Maybe we are not doing the best that we can do. And being able to sit down and having them comfortable with your staff and having your staff on the same page. As Jackie said, I'm one of 5. So having them respect and understand and being able to go and talk to each manager as they would talk to me is very important. And we've gotten some of the best ideas from our volunteers that we forget. You've kind of been in the workforce way longer than I think I have. So they can bring a lot to the table.
they're also coming from a different angle. And you're used to doing things, even though you both think outside the box and are very creative, you do things a certain way all the time. Someone comes in from the outside with no anticipation or expectation of what that can look like, and suddenly they have an idea and say, well, why didn't we ever do it this way? And it's like, we never thought to do it that way. But I think what's really important here, and I applaud you both and would love to hear a little more about the cultures you're building, because at the end of the day, you've said it several times now, they're on the front line. You may be busy, staff may be even doing something else at that moment. It is very possible that in the community or with your own constituents, this is their only experience. That person at that minute represents you completely, and that may be the only person that they meet. And it's not someone on your payroll, it's not someone that has spent years in absorbing the mission and feeling so completely connected. And I think it's extraordinary that you have these volunteers who can make or break a relationship with you that is really critical, and you have to be able to trust them to do that in the right way and represent you.
Absolutely.
So if you have any tips or culture things that you do, the way that you create that stable environment in the organization, again, I guess making sure the staff buys in.
Yes, the staff, I always tell them, I'm like, you got to treat every person coming in like this is their first time through the door. And that is a big part of what we do. Is like, how do you greet them? You're the first face they see walking off the sidewalk. Invite them in like you'd invite your grandma into the door. Or, this is family. We want them to feel that, man, this is somewhere I want to go once a week, once a month. It doesn't matter. But, if they don't have that great experience, the minute they hit your door, they'll always remember that one thing. So we do put a lot of trust in our volunteers to make sure they're representing us the way we would like them to.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us, I would say, just even as an agency, our staff has a very tight-knit, we've got a fun, thriving, enjoyable culture, which really comes down from the top. And I think that feeds right into our volunteer program. Our volunteers come in, we make sure that they're introduced to all the staff. They really feel like they're kind of a part of our family. They come in, they have their own personal relationships with our staff. They crack jokes. It's just a good feeling when they come in. It's a community center. So I think once they become a part of that, it really makes their work even more enjoyable, because it's not only are they giving back, it's not only are they helping in a program, but they're a part of something. And I think it really just feeds into that culture, and then it makes them have the ability that when they're working with your clients, they're just exuding everything that they've gotten from the staff and from the agency. Like I said, it really does come down from the top. And then they know everybody so well that if there ever is an issue, they know exactly what to do because they've seen it before. They know who to go to. And it's all about those relationships, I think.
Starts with the manager.
It does.
It's 100% starts
and
with
the relationship.
Yep.
So it's almost as if you were primed to lead to the next slide by saying that they are a part of something bigger. They're not just volunteers having an impact on a particular program or on a particular day. And that something bigger, of course, is the mission of the organization and being impassioned. People who are passionate and energetic and engaged do so much more for you, for themselves, and for the community. So why don't you tell me a little bit, and we'll start with you, creating that passion. It's easy to say, but hard to ignite and hard to sustain.
Absolutely. As a manager, I really feel like you must be as invested in the individuals as they're invested in you as a manager and with the place that they're volunteering at. And it sounds really simple to be looking around and be like, I heard you were sick last week. How are you feeling now? Simple things that make them feel like, wow, you actually remembered that something's going on in my life. Maybe someone had a baby. We have a newsletter that goes out every week that, shout outs and photos of babies that have come into the program, not into the program, but expanding families. Some people have, like, my business just opened. It's making them feel more a part as a family, that they matter in that group setting, and that what we feel about our job in the theater, they start to roll with it. They start to get that excitement that you are.
Tell me about that newsletter for a minute, or tell us about that newsletter. So does that go to all volunteers and employees?
It does. It goes to both employees as well as the volunteers. And it kind of gives them an overview of the week, maybe some updating policies, something that you saw that you're like, ooh, you know, I saw someone break this rule. Let's have a reminder, guys, look back in the handbook. Silly things like not silly, but do you have to wear a tie to this performance? Or can we wear all green at St. Patrick's Day, and making things more fun and enjoyable that way? But also, we need help for certain performances. Can anybody come in and help us out here? You know, we have pictures of the families or fun events like everyone dressed up in Halloween costumes, kind of keeping it fun and like, oh, look, I made it into the newsletter. That's awesome.
Well, I would think it goes a long way toward making someone feel that they're an official part of the organization, especially if you're doing a newsletter and it's incorporating your volunteers as well. It implies to me, though, that a lot of your volunteers are return, and you mentioned the family of 4 with the 10 and the 12-year-old. Do you find that many of the people who do come back year after year, and so you're not creating a one-off, I wanted to volunteer one summer and I had 5 hours community service, I decided to come to you, rather you're creating that family? I'm assuming that's correct, and I'd love to have you tell us a little more about that.
You are correct with that one. Some of our volunteers, I have some as old that has been with us since 1994. And then most of them are going on 10 years or now. We have new people coming in every single year, but we do have a very, I say 30 to 50, like they're probably there once a week with us, family core. And they kind of started their own thing. We brought them together, and then they're like, well, let's go out for coffee. Well, let's do this. And some of them have already started kind of like what they call it a sunshine club. So if I don't know something's going on in a volunteer's life, they make sure that we know, and if there's something extra we can do for them. And then that builds, and their friends start wanting to come on, and then all of a sudden your family's ginormous. And it's actually the fun part of coming to work is seeing them and catching up with them.
I just love that. So, Jackie, what are you also have? I mean, it's an organization of tremendous passion.
Yeah.
2 great groups coming together with a history of how many years?
Over 200.
Over 200 years. I don't know how many. I'm not going to ask anyone to raise their hand and say if their organization is 200 years old or not. But certainly, it's a milestone. And not anyone in the room is 200. Just the organization is 200. But why don't you tell us a little bit too? You've got so much passion going on at Cornerstone. How are you latching onto that and leveraging it?
Sure. Well, one of the things I think is important to touch on also is really the passion behind our corporate groups that come in, and kind of sharing with them the impact that they're making. So throughout the course of the year, we typically have on average between 50 to 55 corporate groups come in to volunteer within our programs. And just as important as it is to do, individual orientations, obviously we don't do something that's as in-depth with our corporate groups, but I think getting them together before they start their day of service, explaining to them what they're going to be doing that day and how impactful it is. I mean, even if they're just, say, working with our preschoolers for the morning, doing crafts and reading stories, that's huge. They might think, oh, we're just going out to do a day of service, get our numbers in for the year, this and that. But, in all reality, we try to tell them, you come in here for these, 4 hours this morning is giving these kids attention that they might not otherwise get at home. They might not have that support. They get picked up by an older brother, sibling. So you being here on site, giving them that one-on-one attention is just so important. And when the groups hear that, they really perk up, and then they feel like, wow, we are doing something good today, or we're serving these 450 meals. But it's until they hear that what they're doing is really important, it doesn't always resonate. So I think having them come in for like a quick orientation, learning about the program, knowing what they're going to do that day, and hearing that, it really kind of ignites that passion for the day, and I think makes them feel like this day of service is worthwhile. And when we do that, we've probably had, corporate groups who come back to us year after year after year. And we even have a group from Mercer that comes every year, and they lay mulch for us. Mulch. I mean, like the biggest amount of mulch that I've ever seen, and they love it. I'm like, why are you doing this to yourselves? They leave all sweaty, they're tired, their backs hurt, but they know that it's mulch that's going on our preschool playground, that it has to be to a high level so that if our kids fall, they don't get hurt. So I think if they know the reason and the importance behind what they're doing, even if it's just for a few hours once a year, it makes them feel just how meaningful it is, and then they tend to just keep coming back, and those relationships build, and then you get to know the teams on a personal level, and then they might tell another team. So maybe next year we might have 3 teams from Mercer who come back to us, and then it kind of just grows and grows and grows.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating that it's also, you have to keep reminding yourself that it's a two-way street. That, it's not just that you're making a place for someone to do their hours of community service, that I have to do, but actually giving them something meaningful, and in return, you're having projects done that are incredibly important for your organization. So who's going to put down that mulch for those kids, right? So it's a two-way street. And I think that's another important thing that you have been bringing up, both of you, in terms of that professional approach, is that nonprofits tend to, and are getting better at it, but it certainly has a habit of acting like they're begging. You're always on the side that's asking for a favor. We hope you'll volunteer. You're not being paid for the job. We want you to volunteer. You'll always feel, or tend to feel, like someone's doing you a favor. They're doing you a favor to donate. They're doing a favor to give you time. And the reality is, it is a two-way street, and everyone gets as much as they give. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that that's an important message, that you're seeing that evolution in the nonprofit community of really taking a stand and saying, this is something that everyone benefits from. We're not here just the recipients asking for help. So I'm really impressed with all that you've done to make that happen. So in order to be passionate and to maintain that passion, of course, you need to understand the organization's values, its mission, and how you play that role. And I think that probably everyone on the call, as well as in this room, are saying, this is all great, we get it, but how do we do it? The understanding of it in concept and in theory is there, but making it happen every day is very different. So talk about that clear communication and understanding what you're doing. How do you do that? Aaron, we'll start with you.
I'm trying to think of the best way to approach that question. With the mission that we have, we're trying to bring arts, culture, education to everybody. And in order to do that, there's the outreach. And what the volunteers, I loved what Jackie just said before about kind of giving them the idea of what they're really doing. They may just feel like they've sat somebody. Great, I got someone to their seat, but in all reality, you just got someone to the seat that hasn't been out of the house for 6 months, or they've never actually seen a live orchestra. Just the stories behind everything is what I think drives people to want to continue with what they do. We have opportunities where our patrons will do shout-outs and reviews and stuff like that, and I make sure to send it to all of them. They look at the difference you make. And if you believe in what we believe, and giving and being able to provide the arts, which is extraordinarily important, they're giving something a little bit extra that I don't think they really realize.
I think you're taking people past the step of a transaction, and you're making it an experience in a relationship. You didn't just seat someone. You sat them at the beginning of an experience that they have either never had again, or never had, or may never have again, or whatever it may be. And I think we all tend to be more transactional. We're in a hurry. Everybody's time is limited. And you seat the person and hand them the playbill and move on, right? Or look at the ticket and say, 3 down on your right, as opposed to creating an extraordinary experience. No matter what it is, it's the arts and children and families, it makes it more obvious. But every single person in this room that is engaged as a volunteer or is in staff of a nonprofit has that same opportunity to create that extraordinary experience, right? Absolutely. So we've had some experience doing nursery summer camp.
Yeah.
1 day of summer camp.
Oh, yeah.
But why don't you talk to us a little bit about the way you guys are communicating and connecting and getting people to understand as volunteers that they're really embedded in the group.
Sure. Well, even like, Sally said, it's all about relationships. So I think, check in with your volunteers. When they're working in a program, stop in, say, how's it going? Do you like the program that you're volunteering in? Is it going well? Are you enjoying the tasks that you've been in? And if not, then maybe they need to move to another program. But you wouldn't know that unless you make the time for your volunteers, which is really important. You got to check in with them. You got to get some feedback. And sometimes that even means giving critiques. I love to check in with the staff as well to say, hey, is Erin doing a good job? Is she doing what you're expecting of her in the classroom or at the adult day center? How's she doing with the seniors? Are they building a bond? And sometimes you might get from staff, I really need her to do this a little bit more, but then you got to give her that critique. It's all about the relationship. Just like when you have employees, and you got to do, a review or an evaluation, sometimes you kind of need to sit back and see how your volunteers are doing and communicate that with them. Because, ultimately they're there because they want to be helping, so you got to have that communication with them. And I think you also really need to be clear in, just stuff happening around the organization. If there's a big event coming up, let your volunteers know. If there's going to be renovations going on in your facility, let your volunteers, know. If there's a snow closure, make sure that they all know, because the worst thing that could happen is one volunteer doesn't get that email or that phone call, and that is like, oh my gosh, you will never hear the end of this. The worst thing is having a volunteer feel left out. I think you always want to make sure that they know exactly what's going on. They feel like they're a part of everything that you're doing, and they have just as much communication as any of your staff members do.
I'm curious before we go on, and again, I'm going to ask a question in the room, so everyone on listening in remotely can answer for yourselves with your own organizations, but how many of you do keep that communication going, in whether the person is there or not, making everyone feel like they're connected, remembering to say there's a snow day and treating people as if they were almost employees rather than volunteers. I think it's something that everyone should be raising their hand for and saying, yes, we do that, just like the newsletter.
The newsletter, having a phone tree.
Okay.
Like, who calls who to let them know that these things are happening.
Well, the volunteers are truly an extension of everything you're doing and not a separate apart group of people who get second-class status. I think it's really important. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone have any questions here before we move on? Anything? Good. You're answering everything before they can even ask. So we know that you want to attract the best volunteers. You want to train them, and you want to retain them, of course. And retain is a big thing because you don't want them to come in the one door and then out the other door. You spend a lot of time, just as you do in any business, on training and giving people creating experiences for them and helping them get to be the place where they can be on the front line and represent you in a meaningful way. And you do want to hold on to them and have them return and be a meaningful part of your organization. So retention and incentives are important there. Why don't we start with you this time and talk a little bit about that, or a lot about that, actually.
How could you tell that was my favorite
I've been waiting all morning for this one, so you go ahead.
This was one of my favorite things to write about. We have a really nice incentive program, because how many times do you sit around and you're tapping your brain and you're like, how can we say thank you for the hours and hours and hours that these individuals are giving to you? And let me just give you an idea. I have volunteers that do any from their minimum 18 performances with us to 200. It's nuts. And I had an incentive program. I still have the same one. I call it the 50 Plus Club, which got a giggle out of all of them for a while, where gold magnetic name badges for completing 50 performances. It's not required, but now they call it going for gold. And it's become a little core group of people going, are you going for gold? I'm going for gold. And it's become their thing when they come in. Though we celebrate everybody, we do throw picnics at the end to celebrate a very successful season, and everyone's invited, and we used to do all the cooking. Luckily, we get a caterer now, but it used to be a lot. But we celebrate them with gifts at the end, saying, thank you so much, time. I actually brought one of them with me.
Okay, good.
A visual, sorry everyone, on the internet right now. We make calendars for them with all the events and fun things that we do throughout the year with their pictures. And I didn't do it one year, and I really thought they were going to boot me out of the program because they were so upset with me for not doing it. And it shows them that we're taking the time to celebrate them. We do other things. We have Volunteer of the Year awards, someone that's gone up and beyond the call of duty, where you're like, I can't believe how much they're doing for us right now. Rookie of the Year for someone new. And then I was saying, at one point, we had someone do 100 performances with us, and I sat there going, what in the world can I do to say thank you for them? So we have something called the Shining Star Award, and we actually name a seat after them inside the theater to thank them, which is, it's something I'm very lucky that I am able to do. But now they have their own little systems of like, you going for Shining Star? I'm going for Shining Star. So it honestly,
they're creating their own competition amongst
they're creating a competition, which gets them more involved, which gets them more experience, which then we're doing well for our performances and actually having the base that we need to be able to work.
Again, the volunteers are not being treated as part-time, stop by when you feel like it.
Mm-mm.
It's nice of you to drift in and out. These are programs that could work in any corporation at any time for employee recognition, employee of the year, the person gets the parking spot in the front, but you're doing that for volunteers. You're doing that for a group of people who come in and out, but are recognized as having so much value for the event, for the programs, for all the programs.
Well, I'm going to volunteer with Erin.
Yeah, I got that gold badge. Come on in. Exactly. Jackie, what are you guys doing? I know that you certainly are listening to your employees, to your volunteers, and learning from them and recognizing them.
So our volunteers' schedules are kind of all over the place because, like I said, we have so many different programs. So for us, it's a little bit challenging to find the time to sort of convene everybody for, say, like a picnic or something like that. So we try to do, across Volunteer Appreciation Week, a little something every day for the volunteers who are in that particular day. We've got balloons all over the building. We have, banners up for Volunteer Appreciation Week. We give out goodie bags to all of our volunteers. So one day they might get like some little, baked goods with some cookies and brownies and chocolates. Another day, we have little things for the boys versus the girls, or they might get some little body wash and some gum and some pens. All sorts of different giveaways throughout the course of the week. But another thing we do is we really try to personalize it. So I always write handwritten cards to all of our volunteers. And not just, thank you so much for volunteering. You make such a difference. We really try to personalize it and say, Sally, you have been fantastic this year.
Best clone.
I know you've really worked closely with our seniors, and talk about the bonds that she's built with your clients. If they know that you're picking up on, what they've done in your program and that you've actually noticed this stuff, chances are they're going to stay for the long term and they're going to give back even more, and maybe even monetarily too. So we always try to make everything really personal, and we oftentimes also have our clients write thank yous too. So if you're volunteering with our preschoolers, you're going to get a little thank you that's got some finger paint and stuff all over it, or maybe a picture of you and one of our preschoolers from a time that you were volunteering in that classroom. If you're working with our seniors, we're going to send you, a group photo of our seniors along with your thank you card. So we always try to sort of include that impact that you're doing in everything that we're sending to you, but on a really personal level.
I think when you do the unexpected, and the people don't anticipate that you are going to thank them in this fashion and recognize their efforts, it always, hits home and makes it so much more wonderful. And I think that you also have so many corporates. So I'm curious if you don't mind expanding a bit on it's one thing when you think individuals and you're thinking families and individuals and they do return, but you also are a team building, social services kind of experience that many corporations want to have.
Sure.
They want their employees to feel that the business is supporting them in their community involvement. So how do you thank them and get them to return and give them a different kind of experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So we always obviously do our normal thank yous to our corporate groups who come out. I usually send them a handwritten note. But we always make sure that we try to give them a shout out on social media. We know that we try to give them what they want to. So, they want to be acknowledged for that publicly sometimes. So if you come out to volunteer, we'll try to get some really good shots of you working in our classrooms, working with our seniors, working with whoever, and put that out there. And we always try to, send it to our groups, via email so that they have those photos too, for maybe reports that they're doing internally, or maybe they have, an appeal that they're doing, or a corporate newsletter. We make sure that we, always sort of try to capture what they're doing while they're on site and make sure that they get, copies of that, so they can, one, remember us and remember how much fun they had when they were with us. But two, if they want to share that for their own purposes, they're welcome to do that so they kind of have something tangible to lead with.
Sure. A lot of organizations like to do a press release.
Mm-hmm.
Today there's that famous expression, corporate social responsibility. I think most of you have heard that, CSR, and as a result, so many of the good corporations who have a conscience and who are looking beyond profit are looking for those opportunities where they can be meaningful. I think that's the biggest thing that you have learned in this hour today together, is that you're creating experiences that are meaningful for the volunteers, where they recognize how really relevant they are to your program. Again, it's not just, we need volunteers to put down a mulch, you do, and it's an important thing, clearly, because you don't want those kids to get hurt, but it goes so much more beyond that. And the continuousness of the relationships, the continuity of people coming back year after year, really says a lot about the experiences you're creating and the kinds of people that are coming through your door, whether solicited or they just came because they chose to. Does anyone, and I didn't ask earlier, but does anyone have a sense of how much is returned? I know you said 30 to 50 people, I think, is that our core group?
A good core group that you know that they're there 50 times or more per year.
Do you have a sense also of how
We
many
do. We
people?
probably, on like a weekly basis, have a core group of about 85 to 100 people. Throughout the year, we also get a lot of teenagers who volunteer with us, so they might be here, in the spring, and then they have winter sports, come back to us, in the fall, or things like that. But I would say probably similar, about 85 to 100 people who are kind of hardcore, come week by week with us.
And again, I think those statistics and those numbers, the data, says a huge message about what you're doing and how you're doing it, that you can continue to bring in those same people time after time for another experience, and not say, okay, we did there, check the box, we're all through now. So this has been absolutely fascinating. I do have the contact information, so anyone that's interested in seeing the calendar or the handbook or the newsletter, I'm fascinated. We do newsletters here, and we know how hard the work is to do that in there for our own firm and our clients, but the fact that volunteers and others are getting that same information, are being pulled in and connected as if they were and are a viable part of your organization, even though they're the volunteer force. I think it's absolutely awesome. For those who are on the phone and in the room as well, before we conclude and thank our guests, I also want to mention we have some events coming up. We're just kicking off 2020, so we have lots of great things happening. We have other webinars like this one. We have them every quarter. We also have board leadership roundtables, so those of you who sit on boards and are the board chair or in a leadership role on your board, we do those quarterly, and it gives you the opportunity to discuss your challenges and your roles, responsibilities as board chairs, and how you can improve that. We also have CEO roundtables, so those of you who are sitting here in an executive director or a CEO role, those groups meet quarterly also for, again, the purpose of having the chance to talk to other CEOs who sit in that same seat and who deal with what you deal with every single day, and have the chance to really get some hands-on, real-world experiences and sharing best practices with each other. We also are going to have our boot camp is going to come back this year. We ran it for the first time last year. Jay Weissman, thank you very much. And that will be for you if you are in a board chair seat or are going to be assuming one soon. It'll be a fabulous way to spend some time with us. So we thank you all for being here, and thank you. I'd like everyone to please join me in thanking Jackie and Aaron for to immediately sign up. We have sign-up sheets here, so you can just come right over and work at Cornerstone or Mayo and be ready to go. So thank you for being on this call. We look forward to our next webinar, and hope those of you who are on the call will plan on coming in next time and joining us for lunch. And those of you who are here, thank you for being here with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing it.
Yes, thank you, Beth.